The Cartographer's Last Secret. The year was 1688. The city of Amsterdam, a labyrinth of canals and commerce, pulsed with the raw ambition of the Dutch Golden Age. Yet beneath the veneer of gilded prosperity and meticulous organization, a secret had begun to fester and decay. It started, as most great mysteries often do, with a whisper and a sudden, inexplicable disappearance. Our story begins in the shadowed studio of Elias van den Broek, the city's most revered and perhaps most reclusive cartographer. Elias, a man whose entire life had been spent meticulously charting the known world, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind him a legacy of flawless maps and one profound, chillingly unanswerable question. His studio, tucked away on the third floor of a narrow patrician house by the Herengracht Canal, was a sanctuary of ink and parchment. The air was thick and heavy, saturated with the faint, comforting scent of dried vellum, fine lamp oil, and old leather bindings, a fitting atmosphere for the man who was essentially the keeper of the world's boundaries. Elias van den Broek had not been seen for 4 days when the city's shout, or chief law enforcement officer, finally exercised his authority and forced the lock. What they found within was not the evidence of a struggle, nor the chaos of a theft, but rather a tableau of chilling, almost artistic order. A half-finished map lay on the drafting table, a beautifully rendered segment of the Indonesian archipelago, its coastlines perfect, its 100 islands named with a graceful copperplate script. Beside it, however, was the profound anomaly, a single tarnished brass compass, its needle violently and purposefully shattered, lying next to a small, meticulously ciphered note. The note, scrawled in Elias's familiar, yet strangely frantic hand, contained only a short cryptic phrase repeated 3 times. Iterum ad Portam, the gate, the gate, the gate. The brass compass, unlike any common navigational tool of the era, was heavy, strangely warm to the touch, and its casing was carved with elaborate, archaic symbols that no scholar could immediately identify. The shout summarily dismissed the entire scene as the final mad musings of an aging genius who had likely just wandered off in a fit of dementia, perhaps to the taverns of the port or the quiet countryside. But for Willem de Jong, a young apprentice copyist who had idolized Elias for years, the truth felt far more sinister and immediate. Willem knew Elias van den Broek better than anyone. He knew the cartographer was a man whose entire world was defined by precision and logic. A single misplaced latitude line was a calamity. Madness was not in his map. And Willem instantly understood that Iterum ad Portam, again to the gate, was not an ending, not a surrender. It was a clear, if desperate, destination. It was the first trembling clue on a map to a mystery that lay not just in a distant, unrecorded sea, but hidden in plain sight within the city's vast archives. He knew then that he would have to retrace his master's final silent steps, following the trail of ink and legend that Elias had clearly intended to leave behind. Willem began his investigation by returning to the studio, sitting where his master had sat. He focused his entire attention on the baffling ciphered note. The key, he realized, was not the Latin phrase, which was too obvious, but the pattern of the letters themselves. Elias had not encrypted a message, he had encrypted a location. By cross-referencing the frequency of the letters with the geographical markers on the half-finished map, Willem discerned that the cipher translated not into a sentence, but into a very specific set of coordinates. Latitude 4 degrees south, longitude 105 degrees east. The location pointed to an insignificant, tiny island in the Sunda Strait, an island Willem knew existed, but had always been dismissed as a navigational hazard, never worthy of charting in detail. More importantly, he compared the symbols carved on the shattered compass with the flourishes Elias used to decorate his world maps. On the master chart of the East Indies kept in the city's official Hall of Maps, he found it, a faint, deliberately obscured detail. A miniature, unrecognizably shaped island marked not with a Dutch name, but with the very same archaic symbols from the brass compass. The island on the map was labeled, in Elias's tiny, almost invisible script, the Gateway Isle. This discovery shattered his assumptions. Elias had been charting a place he intentionally kept secret. The key was the brass compass. After days of meticulous secret research through forbidden texts and old nautical logs, Willem found a reference to a long-forgotten, obscure historical society dedicated to pre-Roman geography. It was here, in the margin of a brittle, worm-eaten manuscript, that the truth began to solidify. The symbols on the shattered compass fragment were a stylized representation of the Amulet of Polaris, a mythical, quasi-legendary navigation tool said to be older than the magnetic compass itself. This amulet was rumored to be the only thing capable of accurately charting the subtle shifting magnetic anomaly that plagued the very region Elias was last mapping. The text also chillingly revealed that a powerful, unnamed faction, perhaps a competing colonial power or a shadowy cabal of the Dutch East India Company, had been ruthlessly searching for this amulet, believing it held immense commercial and military power, the key to truly dominating the spice routes. This meant Elias was not just a genius, he was a custodian. He had been found out. The shattered compass was not an accident of madness, but a desperate warning. The fragment was a critical piece of the amulet itself, broken off to prevent its immediate use. Iterum ad portam, again to the gate. Elias had been there before, and now he was returning to the one place in the world where he believed its full power could be safely contained, or at the very least, hidden from those who would misuse it. The master cartographer had left the world a treasure hunt.
Willem's final clue was a flash of inspired genius. Elias had never been one for grand gestures. His genius lay in pattern recognition. Remembering his master's peculiar habit of sketching the city's canals in his idle moments, Willem took one of those rough, personal city sketches. He aligned the canal's intersecting points with the newly deciphered latitude and longitude from the note. The alignment pointed directly to the coordinates of the Gateway Isle. This led him to the only place he hadn't fully searched, a false panel in the wall behind Elias's massive leather-bound globe. Inside the hidden compartment was the culmination of Elias's life's work, a completed map of the entire Spice Islands, rendered with a precision that surpassed all public works. On this new map, the Gateway Isle was not obscured. It was clearly, beautifully drawn, an emerald in the turquoise sea, named in sweeping script, the haven of the Polaris. It was here, looking at the final secret map, that the truth became devastatingly clear. Elias van den Broek was not a victim of kidnapping or foul play. His disappearance was a deliberate act of profound sacrifice. He had shattered the compass fragment and left the Iterum ad portam note, not as a cry for help, but as a final coded legacy, trusting that only his sharpest apprentice, Willem, would look deep enough to find the full truth. Elias had chosen to sail to the Gateway Isle, not to keep the amulet's power for himself, but to hide the remaining components in the one place its magnetic disturbance could be stabilized, rendering it useless to those seeking world domination. The master of maps had chosen to become an uncharted point on his own creation. The scout was wrong. Elias had not wandered off.
He had walked straight out of the known world. Now, Willem de Jong, a simple apprentice, stood alone in the candlelit studio, holding the key to an epical secret. The brass fragment, the cryptic note, and the final beautiful map all rested in his hands. He was the inheritor of a sacred trust and the sole cartographer of a monumental mystery. Outside, the familiar sounds of Amsterdam, the clatter of horse hooves, the distant cries of the market vendors pulled him back to his life of security and routine. But the map in his hand called him to the untamed horizon. He had the choice: follow his master's path into the unknown, becoming the new guardian of Polaris and risking everything, or keep the secret, remain in Amsterdam, and live out his days as the new reclusive keeper of a world whose true map now contained one profound, lasting, and dangerous mystery. The story of Elias van den Broek had ended, but the true journey, the quest for the cartographer's last secret, had just begun for Willem de Jong. The question remained, what lay beyond the gate?